And welcome back, everyone, to the Daily Aid on Wood TV Plus. September is Childhood Obesity Awareness Month, and it's a very much a growing issue for so many different families over the years. And we've seen a very dangerous trend kind of continue really for decades now. And again, it's just a topic that keeps always popping up, which is why we decided to speak with somebody from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan to really figure out, really tackle this head on about how not only can we speak to our doctors about how to tackle this issue, but also how can we approach our children and promote those healthier habits. So here is part of that interview, which you can find right now over on our website, woodtv.com. Shanthi, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about a pretty important topic, especially given the fact that September is Childhood Obesity Awareness Month. First things first, I want to touch on a recent study that was actually published earlier this year from the Journal of American Medical, from the American Medical Association, and they found that the children's health has actually deteriorated across several metrics, including obesity, over recent years. And I feel like that is something that we've been hearing about and maybe even kind of already knew just based on really what we've been seeing and hearing from people. When you first saw that study, I mean, what really kind of came to mind, or anything really surprising you at all?
Yeah, so we've seen over the past few decades, since 1990, for example, childhood obesity rates have increased by 12%. That's a huge number. And when I looked at this study, it was looking at numbers from 2011 to 2023. What stood out to me was that the prevalence of 3 to 17-year-old individuals had chronic conditions that rose from nearly 40% to about 46%. So that's a vast number, right? And we understand that obesity is related to so many chronic illnesses like type 2 diabetes, heart disease later in life. But just to see that number really increase in childhood was vast.
And even, you just touched on it, obesity, seeing those numbers is one thing, but then realizing that the weight and the issues associated with that can contribute to other lasting problems and effects like that. And obesity, especially in children, has been a focus really in recent years. But again, with that study, we've been seeing it continue to get worse and worse. I mean, why is this such a hard issue to tackle, you think?
Yeah, well, it's really difficult. I think it's a touchy subject. And
Hmm.
of course, we love and care about children so much. But something that we've been seeing over the years has really changed is a diet high in ultra processed foods is really big. Sweetened beverages is a good highlight there. We see larger portion sizes provided to kids. A lot of people are dining out, overcooking home cooked meals. We see a lot of lack of physical activity. There's only 25% of kids get enough exercise, for example. So all of these things are contributing to the issue. Uh, Another note on the ultra processed foods is that 53% of adults consume, or 53% of adult diets are consumed of ultra processed foods, but 62% of what kids eat are made up of ultra processed foods. So this is a huge contributor to that. So that's something parents can really focus on is what we're feeding kids at home and what we're packing in their lunches.
And that is something I want to get into a little bit later. Is just how parents can actually bridge that gap, maybe talk to their children about healthy ways, healthy eating habits, exercise, things like that. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. A couple of things I do want to touch on with you, Shanti, of course, is something called contributing factors, at least kind of leading into some of these numbers that we've been seeing. You mentioned the really crazy stark contrast between the ultra high processed foods, between what maybe us adults are eating and versus what kids are eating. Specifically with that, I mean, I guess, is there more of just a focus on high, I guess what we would call maybe unhealthier foods? I mean, is that just something that just automatically attracts children to it? I mean, well, why are we seeing just such a huge gap right there?
Sure, marketing is a big thing, right?
Mhm.
The big, colorful, easy to eat, delicious looking foods is a big part of why kids are drawn to those foods. But
Mhm.
it's also just so convenient and they taste really good. That's why ultra processed foods are so popular among adults as well. It's easy to pack something pre-packaged versus something fresh oftentimes, but that doesn't mean that there's not really easy solutions or easier solutions and easy things to pack that are pre-packaged in the health realm. Um, when it comes to ultra processed foods, the top categories that we see consumed by kids are sandwiches, like burgers. It's going to be sweet baked products, it's going to be savory snacks, pizzas, sweetened beverages. So I'd advise parents to look at those categories and see, where am I including more of those foods and what are ways that we can make those healthier. So for example, ultra processed foods, I mentioned that sandwiches are part of that. What are ways that we can include healthier meats, for example? Because deli meats are such an easy thing to add to a sandwich.
Mhm.
It's such an easy thing to pack in a lunch. So doing things like egg slices, rotisserie chicken that's been sliced, grilled chicken that's been sliced, maybe things like prepackaged tuna. Those are going to be healthier option to add to your sandwich. Also thinking about our bread choices, so choosing things like um, whole wheat bread instead of the white bread. Those are going to be all good options.
Mhm. And Shanti, I feel like a lot of people, myself included, can relate to this a little bit. I was a bigger kid growing up, and I remember especially being very embarrassed about it. Not just, going to the doctor for your yearly physical and seeing the number on the scale, but also, when your parents are maybe trying to get you to eat a little bit healthier, you could kind of pick up on it, that the fact that, your
Yeah.
parents are seeing your weight kind of fluctuate a little bit, and maybe that's why. So it can be a very touchy subject, a very embarrassing subject, especially for kids. Any tips or really any ideas that maybe parents can help start that conversation? And we'll get into tips in just a little bit, but as far as starting that conversation and building that trust with your child and really just getting them on the right track, even just from a beginning standpoint, any tips you'd like to give to parents out there?
Yeah, just really encourage an open dialogue, right? Talk to your kids about weight and encourage them to share their thoughts and feelings about their body image. I think it's really important to not be judgmental about people's
Mhm.
size. So, even avoiding calling people skinny, calling people fat, and instead using words like people in larger bodies as to kind of destigmatize weight. Also, just take a positive approach. We want to focus on ways that we can be healthy and not just that how it impacts weight, right? So, hey, this is a way we can be healthy and just feel good in our bodies as a family. So, being active and eating healthy foods and just relate those behaviors to feeling good versus something on the scale.
Mhm. And is there maybe an age range when maybe parents should maybe start thinking about it? We hear all the time that, kids will sometimes put on a little bit of weight when they're babies. And then, once they start growing, they'll thin out a little bit more. As far as when is that time to start that conversation, is there any sort of clarification, or is that maybe more so suitable for a doctor question?
Yeah, for sure. Something you want to talk to your doctor about. And
Hmm.
something to keep in mind with kids too is that oftentimes the solution isn't going to be weight loss approaches to kids losing weight. It's more about them growing into their size
Hmm.
as they get older. So, definitely a case by case basis that you want to talk to your doctor about. But oftentimes it can just be simple ways to get more active and eat healthier where they'll grow into it.
Mhm. And now I want to spend some time talking about those helpful tips for parents. Focusing on not just the exercise but also the food side of thing. Let's start with the food. I think we can all agree that kids maybe aren't as gung ho about eating vegetables and
Yeah.
fruits all the time. But as far as and it would be easy just to say, parents, get rid of all the junk food. Only give them healthy options. That's not the type of world we live in. I feel like
Right.
most families would have a lot of difficulty doing that. As far as getting kids to eat healthier, what is a good step to begin that process?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We don't want to villainize any foods because part of having a healthy relationship with food is set up during childhood. And that means that no foods are off the table completely, right? It's just that some foods are sometimes foods that we shouldn't choose as often. And some foods are ones that we should really be encouraging kids to eat more often. One really big thing is role modeling, right? So if kids see their parents being active and choosing healthy foods, they're more likely to see that as the norm and follow in their footsteps. So the way that parents talk about food, behave around food is extremely important. I like to say, don't yuck my yum. Parents can try to reserve their opinions, negative opinions about how foods taste, especially healthy foods, as much as possible, because it's possible that kids will like it. Another thing to keep in mind is that being patient is so important. Kids sometimes take 8 up to even 15 exposures to a certain food, let's say broccoli, for example, to actually end up liking that food. So you can talk to your kids, hey, maybe you just don't like that food yet. This isn't scientifically accurate, but saying something like, hey, maybe you haven't grown the taste buds for it yet. We'll try
Mhm.
again later, as is something you can try. I think too, empowering kids to get to choose is really important. So if you take your kids to the grocery store, allowing them to make make a choice versus just saying, hey, we're having carrots for dinner. Hey, would you like to have carrots or cucumbers or tomatoes for dinner? That way they have a choice of which vegetable they'd like to eat or try. Um, but they're not feeling forced into that decision. I think another important thing is if kids are a part of preparing that, they're more likely to eat it. And also if a kid is more involved in the growing process. So if you're having little seedlings in your house and they're getting to see that food grow, they're more likely to eat it as well.
Mhm. And as far as exercise goes, Shanti, I mean, we live in an age now where every kid's got a screen in their hands for the most part,
Yeah.
and it's really difficult to get kids to, step away from them, whether they're working on their homework or just enjoying, a show after school or something like that. Is there maybe a helpful tip that you would offer parents just on how they can, not villainize screen time because, we live in an age when that is something very much needed in a day-to-day life, but as far as getting them outside, even just for a couple of minutes a day. I mean, just ways to make kids who are never outside, kind of enjoy it a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So only about 25% of children get enough exercise according to the
Mhm.
American Academy of Pediatrics. So that's huge, right? We want them to be outside. And I think something important to keep in mind is that unstructured activity is so important, not only for exercise, but for their creativity too. So I don't think as a parent, you need to feel bad about them just being outside and moving, making up their own games and things like
Mhm.
that. Doesn't have to be a sport. Some fun things that you could think about doing, especially now that it's fall, it's so beautiful outside, is doing something like a nature walk scavenger hunt or a nature bracelet walk. They can maybe have things on a list that they have to spot on a nature walk. Maybe it's a bird, tree, certain type of leaf, or a certain type of insect. Or you can put packing tape around their arm, kind of collect cool things like leaves, flowers, little rocks. Also, think about just trying new sports as a family. It doesn't mean that you have to be good at it, but just doing things active as a family beyond just going on a walk, like making up new games with a ball game or something like that is really fun.
Absolutely. All great stuff. Shanti, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about this very important topic. We can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much.
Of course. And great stuff from Shanti. Always appreciate the time there.